Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Citizen Representatives podcast. My name is Tyler. I'm here with my good friend Adam. Adam, how are you today?
Doing very well. Thank you, Tyler. Good to be here with you again.
I said good friend this time. I don't think I've said that before. How do you feel about the
Oh,
promotion?
that's quite generous of you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't have many good friends.
All right, well, you're welcome.
I love you too, Tyler.
Maybe I'm assuming things that I shouldn't be assuming. That's like, when you're
No, we
dating
are
someone,
we are
oh,
good.
this is my boyfriend or girlfriend. Oh, really?
This, this is Adam. He's a friend of ours. He's a friend of yours. That's when you know you've made it, when you're a made man.
So did you get your dog out of Afghanistan?
Oh, no. I didn't know I had a dog in
Neither,
Afghanistan.
well, neither did anyone else. So that's the
Oh,
rub. All the service dogs that were in Afghanistan, you may have seen this. Well, they got left behind along with hundreds of Americans, and so this is
oh
quite
man.
the deal. Pretty sad, actually. Uh,
Yeah, that's awful.
you have these dogs that are service dogs. I don't know in what manner they were service dogs, or if they were police dogs, or emotional support dogs, but that's the reporting right now is that quite a few dogs have been left over in Afghanistan, and they weren't able to make their way over. But
Hmm.
we'll get to that in a minute. Citizen representatives, the goal and the aim of citizen representatives is to reduce corruption in politics by uniting as legal citizens to elect lawmakers with the iron-clad agreement that they will vote on bills according to a majority vote by citizens in their district or state. So I don't know exactly how citizen representatives would help with something like Afghanistan. Perhaps, perhaps once enough representatives and senators are under the umbrella of citizen representatives. Now that's me being presumptuous, just assuming that we're going to take over.
Op Optimistic.
Optimistic. Perhaps in the future these wars won't get voted on. There was a big pressure. Of course, in many ways it was warranted. You have the attack of 9/11 on the United States, and um, it's come out that Saudi Arabia was mostly behind that. But of course, so we go in to Iraq and Afghanistan and all these other
Yeah.
places that aren't Saudi Arabia. But that's beside the point. Perhaps in the future that people under the auspices of citizen representatives would not vote to go in and do kind of these exploratory wars and missions that may not be in our best interest.
Well, or the more likely outcome would be that we would vote for something like that because the information and intelligence seemed to be there, and it seemed to be a reasonable thing to go into these countries, right? Harboring supposedly bin Laden and probably were for a time. But then
You mean at the
after
at the time,
at the
like
inception,
yeah,
2001, 2002,
yeah.
right? But then by
Oh, I'm sure we
2004,
I'm sure we would have.
yeah, by 2004, then you have a remediation where you can go back in and, okay, do we still want to be here? Let's think about this. And maybe having had this experience now, we won't have to get into another 20-year war.
I'm wondering how much of a difference social media would have made back then, because 2001, few people had the internet as we do now. There was, you know, video was, it'd take forever to download the video. I remember, and you may have done this too, getting Napster, or I don't remember the exact client, but downloading songs and seeing, oh, there's all these songs that are being shared in the internet. So they were only like 5 or 7 megabyte songs, or they weren't very big.
Yeah.
And you press download, and then you'd wait for like 3 or 4 hours, and then they would finally get them. So it wasn't like we had streaming back then, or
Yeah.
even social media really at all. So I wonder, what do you think? How much of I saw it? I saw a question posited on the internet. You know, imagine what they got away with back then before the internet. because they're not getting away with nearly as much now. I mean, they get away with a lot nowadays, but
Yeah,
not nearly
but
as
is it
much as
just,
I think they would have 20 years ago.
well, but you could play off the other side of that. So it's the evolution of social media, right? At the beginning, yes, 10 years ago, Facebook and all these mediums seemed to be platforms where you could have at least some discussion back and forth. Things were tolerated, but suddenly, the last 4 or 5 years, now we see that these media companies are involved in defining what the truth is. They're not only platforms for information, they are platforms for the information, the accepted information. So it would be interesting to see what kind of orthodoxy they might adopt on a new war opportunity. Say we had another incident, God forbid, like 9/11, and we say, well, we got to go here, we got to go hunt them down.
Well, there's always
What do,
some target that the economic fund, what was it, the Worldwide Economic Fund, or there's the WHO, there's all of these people who are
World Bank,
supranational. They're above the World Bank, the reserve
the
banks, and all these things.
NGOs, yeah.
There's always targets, and right now it seems that the targets they're trying to get everyone vaccinated. So that's another thing. Anyway, interesting. I still think, even though with everything that has been clamped down with social media and things like that, they at least haven't been. No, I was going to make a point, but they said you can still have your own website. And then I thought back to Parler, and they shut down Parler. Parler was on Amazon's servers, and they're like, no, not anymore. They shut them down. You don't really hear about Parler anymore. I think they do exist, but is anyone using it? I know I haven't.
Yeah, it's coming back a little bit. I think people are trying to give it attention, but obviously it just doesn't have the traction that other. I mean, I'm on there, but I don't interact with it a lot. And honestly, the
So
only
I
reason I'm on
signed up
Facebook
for.
is to interact with some of the groups that I'm a part of. So
I signed up for MeWe. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think
MeWe,
so. Yeah, yeah.
MEWE. I signed up for MeWe today, but I couldn't. I wasn't. I gave it access to my friend list, and I must not have any friends who are already on there, because it didn't say, "Oh, so and so is on there," that I could.
Oh.
And maybe I just don't have any friends, but
You
that could be
you pinged me and I accepted.
on MeWe
I was yeah, I was already on there.
today.
Yeah, you have a friend, me.
Ah, yes, first friend, good
Yeah,
friend.
good friend, first good
Okay.
friend.
Well, I don't know how to use the site. It's probably similar to Facebook in some ways. I'll search you and see how that works.
Yeah, see how many posts I've
We've
made.
talked about this before, but I think the future of social media is going to be more decentralized and more crypto based, so that they can't take your presence. I think there will be more of an ownership of your actual online persona, so that you can, because right now you could spend your whole life building up a following on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, and that can be taken from you in a second by some little punk who
Yeah.
doesn't like what you're saying. And I don't think that's right. So I think with a lot of the changes that are coming, how did we get on this tangent? Voting for wars and citizen representatives. Anyway, that'll be an interesting time to see, and looking forward to that. Looking forward to the censorship being toned down quite a bit. So we have the Biden administration just seeming to make every mistake possible in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, it just doesn't seem, it's almost to a point, and I think we kind of mentioned this before, it's almost like this is what their plan was. Just because of the execution. And I don't mean that as a pun or, I don't mean to make that. Just because of the way that they carried out their withdrawal. They did it backwards. And now basically, they did it backwards in with the regards of they just pulled all the military. There didn't seem to be kind of a buildup of, we knew that there was a date that people wanted that the military was going to be out. But everyone was told, it seems to me, that it was going to be fine, at least for a while. They didn't anticipate that the Taliban would take over so quickly. And so they gave up air bases. They gave up, in some counts, $86 billion worth of planes and arms and helicopters and guns and ammo and all of these things, which is a lot of money. I read a report that Russia doesn't even spend that in a year on their defense. I don't know how many countries do. The United States may be the only one that would ever spend that much per year. But now, of course, the Biden administration is making like they're going the rounds congratulating themselves on how the withdrawal was such an overwhelming success. So this President Biden gave an address today and basically said, we needed to do this, and so we did, and we did it great. Paraphrasing. This is Ben Shapiro summarizing. This was a success, and it's Trump's fault. This was flawlessly handled, and it's the Afghan military's fault. We are gone, and the terrorists just took over, and also we are going to fight terrorists no matter where they are. You buy the ticket, you take the ride, America. It just seems there's a disconnect between what everyone has been seeing and what they're saying. Are they going to get away with this, or are they right? Maybe they are right.
Well, I think there's certainly some blame to be had there, and it would be nice if leaders once in a while said, "Hey, we messed this up. We're trying to fix it now." Of course, that doesn't happen. But yeah, to your other question, I don't think I I mean, the narrative that gets ingrained in people's head is the one that's last spoken and where there isn't enough pushback against. So the mainstream media, I mean, they're not pushing back very hard, and they're going, and I think a lot of them are going, well, we're out now. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Nothing to see here, folks. So I don't know.
Of course,
I don't know how far this will go.
Most people agree that, it's time to get out of Afghanistan. And that we made this point last week. Yeah, the plan is, I think that's probably a good plan to get out. Yeah. It's just, are we going to not tell anyone, just leave the bases? I saw a report, and this is anecdotal. So there was a group of Marines, or they were soldiers, and they missed their flight out of Afghanistan because the base was dirty. And so their commander made them stay and clean the base. I'm just like, and you just hear stories like this, and that's not an isolated incident thing. Just stories like that, like these commanders are, and the generals are just. Why hasn't anyone been fired? Why hasn't anyone resigned? Why? I mean,
yeah. Well, and you would think after 13 people are killed, pretty needlessly, that there would be some repercussions for that. Like somebody's, the buck would stop somewhere for that fiasco. I mean, that's just horrific. That should never have happened. So, but yeah, that's yesterday's story now.
That was like 4 or 5 days ago. That's me. Yeah. That's me paraphrasing President Biden. I think like the day after that happened.
What's in the past? We can't live in the past. We have to move on to the future.
So then the next story is the military announces a drone strike against some planners. Now, they don't say what they were planning. They were probably wedding planners, if it was because Obama bombed a wedding back in his day, in my recollection. If I'm wrong, let me know. And some civilians were killed, and so they're touting these planners that were taken out. Well, then you look into the details, and some civilians, a family was actually killed in this drone strike, and they're not denying that this has happened. And it's just like, okay, we have our troops attacked. We would expect kind of a response from the military, but this is their response to kill some planners that they won't even name. How do they know that they're planners? What position were they? Were they probably, were they high value targets? Were they, what were they planning? And then to hear that a family was taken out in Afghanistan, an Afghani family was taken out, and it's just heartbreaking the way that this is all panned out. And it just boggles the mind that it has been handled so poorly, and then they come out and give themselves pats on the back like they're just the greatest thing that ever happened. Oh yeah, it was time to get out, and we did. And so congratulate us, it just rubs me the wrong way. And then you have the story of the these were working. This is the headline from the Daily Mail. Not a great day for America's service dogs. U.S. military abandoned dozens of dogs alongside planes, Chinooks, and Humvees worth billions in scramble to leave Kabul. And so the dogs will most likely die. The American Humane, which is I don't know what they are, condemned the death sentence for the animals allegedly left behind who now face torture at the hands of the Taliban. And then I read, again, this is anecdotal, so if I'm wrong, let me know. This was a story that part of the reasoning why they were left behind was because the CDC said that dogs or any other animals can't come on plane back home from Afghanistan and from other countries. So now we see the CDC getting involved again. All right. We should do a ranking of the worst governmental agencies that there are, and I think CDC would be near the top.
Right now, for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of things going on with Afghanistan. It just seems to get worse and worse every day. I know it's going to get, well, I can't say that it's going to get better. At least we won't hear about it as much, most likely, because the news is going to lose interest, and they don't want to generally report things that are negative to President Biden. Oh, I said that P word again. Dang it. It is interesting that they have, at least some of these organizations have reported things that are not necessarily, they don't necessarily make Biden look good. So is there another angle there with them trying to get the vice president in, or is it just, would they just lose even more credibility if they didn't? Like, are they just forced to report on this, or what?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to, I think the little bit of honesty that there still is in the mainstream media will sometimes come out in a story like this when they see it just mangled. But, then they look at the options, and we've mentioned this before. It would be a no-brainer, I think. I mean, they've got endless reasons to put pressure on Biden to either resign or to invoke the 25th Amendment or impeach him or whatever they want to do. But the alternative is the vice president, and the optics there just have not been very good. Even before becoming vice president, right? During the campaign, it was just dismal. Every time a mouth was opened, it was, it seems like the wrong thing came out. So I think they look at that and they go, okay, this will blow over. We'll be a little bit critical. We'll try and look objective. But I think it would have been nice if they would have put enough pressure on to at least force resignation of, some of the top Pentagon people. It would be nice to see Milley gone, but whatever.
I think this kind of
you just
gets.
put, sorry, it just becomes an opportunity to place somebody even worse in those positions of power. So I don't know what the solution is.
I kind of get tired of this idea, but I'm going to use it anyway. Can you imagine? I hear this all the time. Can you imagine if Trump did this? If he would have been impeached 3 times by now. If anything that Joe Biden had done since this Afghanistan withdrawal, if Trump had done any one of these major points that he had done, if Trump had looked down at his watch while the bodies were coming home that had been killed in a preventable terrorist attack, and looked at his watch, he would be out now. And this is what happened with Joe Biden. He sneakily looked at his watch while the people were coming home. And there were also stories of him being disrespectful in a way because he was trying to compare these kids who lost their lives to his son who died from cancer. That's not the same. It is losing a kid, but the optics just aren't there. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say no doubt. And rightfully so. Some of those, I think they are impeachable offenses. Especially if it's like a second or third strike, right? You make major flub ups within a matter of a couple weeks, like the way that Biden did. And I think, okay. I think you would have had a lot of Republican support for impeachment at that point if it was handled that way, which speaks to just how bad the previous 2 impeachment trials were and how partisan they were, right? That they had to invent these narratives that just didn't really have the basis for impeachment to begin with.
No, impeachment is a supposedly high crime and misdemeanor. And I think giving the Taliban, an enemy of ours, $86 billion worth of equipment, and then, basically letting them set the terms on this. Like, whenever you hear the spokespeople for the administration, they're like, well, we're hoping the Taliban will keep their promise. Well, the administration is keeping their promises to the Taliban. They're not keeping their promises to the United States people. Now, this rubbed me the wrong way also, and I'll include a link to this. But a spokesman, Jake Sullivan, he doesn't rule out giving direct aid to the Taliban if they behave. I don't think they would give them any sort of aid right now, besides giving them $86 billion worth of weapons and things like that. But he was asked specifically by George Stephanopoulos, I believe, are you ruling out any sort of aid to the Taliban? And he talks about giving aid to the Afghan people, which is fine, I suppose. And then he posed the question about giving aid to the Taliban, and he basically said, if they live up to their terms, then we won't rule that out. And I'm just like, what more can they give?
Anytime they say give it to the people, it's like, and you're already starting with a corrupt government. Do we have ABA and account numbers for all the Afghan people? They've all got sophisticated banking, at their hand, their fingertips. So, how are we going to get that money to them? It's going to filter. We do this all the time. We give money to bad actors in the name of helping people, and it just never gets to them, and it just goes to fund corrupt governments.
No, it doesn't filter down.
They buy guns to fight us and other weapons, and it's just an endless cycle.
And that seems to happen with all the foreign aid that we're giving out. What I would support is if we give it directly to the people in the form of Bitcoin. This is not to change topics too much, but and I don't want to go too long into this, but El Salvador is set to have. We've talked about this before. I believe that they're set to make Bitcoin their reserve currency, or at least in addition, they're making it so it's legal tender, along with, I believe, the U.S. dollar. And so now the government of El Salvador has said, we're going to give each one of you, I think it was like $50. I don't remember exactly the denomination, but it was that much in Bitcoin. And now businesses will be required to accept Bitcoin as payment. And so with something like that, you give everyone maybe they probably don't have cell phones or even ways or computers. So it may not work in that regard, but a lot of these countries do. You look at some of the African countries; they're some of the biggest adopters of Bitcoin because their currencies have been debased so often that they have been burned so many times that they're like, I got to do something. You can get, I don't know how cheap they are overseas, but for a work project, I bought a $30 cell phone, and it's a smartphone, and I could store Bitcoin on there if I wanted. So it can't be, the idea that we can't get phones into everyone's hands to be able to give them some money directly in the form of Bitcoin. I think a lot more people would be on board with foreign aid if we did it that way. And I don't know if many people are talking about that.
No, it's a good idea. It's a good point.
Shifting gears, we have more vaccine mandates and passports coming. There was a story of a mother stripped of her custody because of her vaccination status. This lady, this is a story from the Washington Post. I saw it elsewhere first, but I'm linking to the Washington Post. A judge asked a mother if she got the coronavirus vaccine. She said no, and he revoked custody of her son. And so she was at a hearing with her ex-husband. They were talking about child support and things like that. And the judge out of nowhere asks her if she's been vaccinated. And she says, no, I've had bad reactions in the past. So he takes custody from her and doesn't allow her to see her kid. Now, shortly thereafter, he does reverse his decision because I think he got quite a bit of backlash. And rightfully so. I don't think... I don't see the connect between those two. They always tout these things. I won't go there. So what's next for us? The WHO, which is the World Health Organization, which nobody should pay attention. They've been wrong at every
turn.
They seem to have been wrong quite a bit. And they're pushing an agenda, and it doesn't seem to be related really to health. They've come out with technical guidance for vaccine passports. And so there's now a PDF version of this that you can download. And it basically provides guidance for vaccination papers. So I'm not going to read it all, but I'll give you some highlights. It's called Digital Documentation of COVID-19 Certificates, Vaccination Status. I'll just share my screen, I guess. Is that blinking like it is on my screen? Or is that a solid picture? It's blinking?
It's blinking.
That's weird.
It's Anthony blinking.
Anthony blinking. Digital documentation of COVID-19 certificates. There. I don't know why that did. Now it's better. Technical specifications and implementation guidance. So they talk about, you're typically given. Scroll down. Number one, you're given a vaccination card. You have a record. And then they're talking about converting it into a QR code that can be searchable. You just scan that and it can bring up your record. A PDF handout And then, of course, they're talking about having this being able to be loaded onto a cell phone, a smartphone. And I don't know if they talked specifically about crypto in here, about having it kind of on the blockchain, which is an immutable record. It's something that can't be erased. Let's see. Anyway, the point being that they've been planning this type of thing for decades probably, and they've been waiting for an opportunity. And I don't know why these other, there was SARS, there was, what are some of the, like the bird flu, the avian flu, there were a number of other flus that were probably just as deadly, but we just didn't hear about them nearly as much. Is coronavirus different than these? Why was this one different? Am I wrong in my generalization of the lethality of some of these, or
I mean, it's just speculation, but I think probably if we knew real accurate numbers, you're probably right. I mean, they were just as deadly or deadlier, maybe perhaps some of them, but if you don't give them attention the way we gave this one attention, I mean, SARS happened during Obama's administration, and it just kind of came and went. I guess the timing was bad. So I don't know. It would be curious to go back and be able to see if there were any investigations done into those viruses, if they truly occurred naturally, or if they were accidentally released from a lab somewhere in the world.
Did you do quotations when you said accidentally?
In my head, I did. Yeah, curiously, they all originate in Asia, right? Why is that?
In the wet markets, they always blame the wet markets. Like, I don't
pangolins.
Know. Like bats, the bats are flying around and taking baths in soups and things like that, and they're really virulent. So what will this passport be used for? If they are eventually able to, let me back up and make my point quickly. I think that when you actually look at who died just of COVID, the numbers are far less.
Right.
So there was a big incentive when we've talked about this before. There was a big incentive to have anyone who dies of COVID, who dies with COVID, to have them in the documentation that they died from COVID. There's the with and the from, and I think there's a big disconnect between that, and so I think the numbers are inflated. And so and there was an opportunity to get a president out that they didn't like. With President Obama, I don't know. We heard about these things, but obviously not to the same level. There were no lockdowns, and I think if you looked at the numbers, the actual COVID numbers with the actual SARS numbers, because I don't know if those were manipulated or not. I think the COVID ones were definitely juiced. I think that they were inflated quite a bit.
Well, and the studies that had been done prior to COVID becoming a thing all validated the fact that lockdowns don't work, masks do not work in the general environment. And so that was the standard. That's what the studies said before COVID became a thing. This is what the WHO and the CDC all followed. And so, yeah, why would you got this thing called SARS. Why would you panic the public and tell them to mask up and tell them to that we need to hunker down for 2 weeks, turning into 2 years?
So how will these passports be used if they are able to implement this and to be able to force people to carry these things around? What will it allow us to do? What will it prevent us from doing? What's your analysis there?
Well, I think it's going to depend largely on businesses, right, and what their decisions are. There's a lot of buy-in from certain industries. Like right now, I know if you want to go watch a certain football team, you have to show, they won't accept a negative test, right? You've got to have the passport. I have a buddy who has season tickets somewhere in this country to a big time NFL team. And he's not very happy that I won't be able to attend with him. Actually, it's kind of funny. Um, and I think that's probably the reason a lot of people succumb and just get vaccinated. They're like, screw it, man. Just, gosh, it's not worth the hassle. They're going to do this thing.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are upset about that, about them. Um, I was talking to you earlier, and I don't want to get into too many details, but in our congregation, there was a big guilt trip for basically 2 hours about getting vaccinated and showing your obedience and things like this. So it's not just pressure coming from the government; it's pressure coming from church groups, it's pressure coming from families, it's pressure coming from everywhere. And I had a good talk with my dad about this. They're using this as a vector for tyranny, basically. If they can, they're using the pretext of your health to be able to control you. And this is what, and I think you would agree with me, they're using, and they will use the vaccine passports as a way of controlling us. They've already talked specifically about preventing people from being able to buy and sell. I mean, it's like, what chapter of the book of Revelation are we on today? You know?
Yeah.
It's just
yeah, well, and the more data that is actually out there about what the vaccine's efficacy is, and if you're brave enough to read information that isn't supposedly fact checked and considered misinformation, but you're brave enough to look at the actual statistics and look at the numbers, say, coming out of Israel and the UK, and because they're ahead of us in the game and they have huge populations that are vaccinated. If you start to dig down into those things, they want to get people vaccinated before some of that comes to public knowledge on a large scale. And now they're pushing the booster. It's like, wait, I need a booster 4 months later? Are you kidding me? And so a lot of this push to get people vaccinated is beyond even just control. It's punitive, right? We are going to punish you for your views because you will not follow the leader. And the leader is science. There's your quotations.
That's a good point. In Australia and New Zealand, you're kind of seeing this right now. And a lot of people don't know about what's really going on in there. And I don't know how bad it is. This may just be some isolated incidences that I've seen. But people are being arrested for organizing protests. Like there's really no free speech down there. People are being arrested for not wearing a mask outdoors, and they're very strict when you can and can't leave your home. And it's basically you can go out to get food, or you can go to care for people who are not able to care for themselves, and very few other instances. And it's a lockdown country, and Canada is starting to be is he called the Prime Minister or the prime doofus of Canada? I watched him do a thing today, and it was just so scripted and so like he just took an acting lesson. The dramatic pauses and we really want you to do this, and it was just like I had to laugh. It was like, this is kind of comical, just the way that he's presenting himself as a figure of someone that he should be listened to. I think they're also going to, once you have this associated with on your phone, they'll be able to track you and be able to say, well, you can't fly now, or because of they're going to incorporate this into the global carbon taxes. And so that's another thing that they're pushing. And so they're going to use this to restrict pretty much your ability to travel anywhere, to do whatever you want, to eat what you want, to have children, possibly. There's so many different things. I know this sounds, oh, you're over the edge. So many of the conspiracy theories of even just a couple years ago have been proven true. So it's not something that I'm especially excited for. But I was, my wife, switching gears just slightly. In the past, I've looked at websites to buy jets. Like, ooh, I'm going to start making a lot of money, and I'm going to buy an airplane, a jet. Well, today I was looking at cruise ships. So that's something that I'm looking at. Now, I say that in the context of starting a new country.
Nice.
This is, first of all, do we need to start a new country? If so, why? Can our current country be saved? I mean, that really is what we're trying to do with citizen representatives. I think that there still is a good chance that we can fend off the tyranny, so to speak, and the control and the coercion. I think there still is a big opportunity to do that. And even if we do that with citizen representatives, there may be a need or a want to start a new country. So what do we need to? Should we just be comfortable where we're at because you and I are probably doing pretty well for ourselves? What's your take?
Yeah, it's hard because I think so much of the world is so, we've come a long ways globally. Poverty it exists, but it really doesn't have to. It only exists because of corruption and bad ideas. But a lot of people, simply because of technology, we're a very comfortable society, and so I think that's why we're kind of apathetic when these things happen, and we kind of like, okay, it'll be fine. It won't go that far, and we lose sight that we're the frog in the pot. Just pretty soon it's going to get up to a nice 90 degrees, and we'll we'll be going, oh, that feels pretty good. How hot can we go here? But at every turn in the history of the world, right, when things got bad enough and painful enough, people moved on. They just said, okay, that government, there's just no hope for that form of governance, and let's move on. But they always had the frontier, right? Cross the sea, go west. Let's find the next little parcel of land and build a heaven out of hell. And people have done that, and it's worked out pretty well. If especially over the past 2,000 years, we can see this trend where people build a little bit better society. It's never perfect, but it's a little bit better than it was. So where do you go now? We always say this. We've talked about this before, right? We've been doing these shows long enough that we've talked about these things before, but they're worth repeating. You have the sea, you've got space. So far, those aren't owned as we know it. And so I think those are the next possible frontiers. Unless you can find a little island somewhere or some parcel of land like El Salvador that wants to live in freedom. Perhaps they'll let us in.
There are some projects that are trying to do that and get some part of an unused portion of land so that they can kind of develop it and get some of the protection from the parent country. And I'm going to look into a list of those and share those at another time. But I do think that there comes a time when we need more competition among countries, because there are very few countries with real freedom, with a real free market, with a currency that is not constantly debased. And I don't think that we've reached that 1,000 years of peace, so to speak, as the Bible. Is that in the Bible? The millennium.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I you know I don't think we're necessarily in that time period yet. What's it going to take to get there? And I think we need more competition among countries to make it so that there is an incentive for these countries. Because once you start, if there's free flow and movement among countries, why do so many people want to come to the United States? Because of an opportunity. Even though, I mean, we do have a free market in many areas, but there's really no free market in education. There's really no free market in healthcare. And if you're thinking to yourself, yes, there is, there's really not. Once you start looking into the funding mechanisms of these industries, there's really not that. Once you understand how they're funded, it's not a free market. Another one being real estate, and those are three big ones. I'm sure that there are more, but those are just three off the top of my head. The normal. If you think about this, I can't remember if I've kind of made this point before, and it's a point that I heard on a podcast talking about Bitcoin. Surprise. The normal inclination for any person is to get a good deal, right? When you go, Adam, to the supermarket or whenever, maybe you don't do any of the shopping, so maybe I can't. Do you buy things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you,
Yeah.
in your method of purchasing things, are you always buying the best of the best? Do you shop around? I mean,
I think we're
our natural
cognizant
inclination is to look to do that, right?
Yeah, I think we're aware of deals, especially if it's a piece of furniture or a piece of technology or something like that. Food's trickier, right? Because I can buy the cheapest food, but it's probably really, we've become more informed in the last 20 years about the quality of some of those cheap processed foods. And so I think there's now a re-education about things like that. And I know I'm kind of talking around your actual question, but we do try to intend to buy more quality
We try to
foods
find the best value. We try to find the
for the
best. I
money.
think I can summarize what you're saying, for the money. I mean, we all want. I say we all, but we all want pristine, organic, this or that. Well, sometimes we can't afford that, so we'll just get the next best thing. We're always looking for the best deal for our money. I think as a whole of society, we tend to try to do that. Well, in those particular areas of, in healthcare, you don't know what you're paying until you get the bill for many things. There are some things that are upfront, there are some privately paid things, but by and large, the market as a whole is not free market. Anyway, what I'm getting at is we need more competition. There needs to be competition in money. And so in order to do that, we may need to start a new nation. And this will be in the show notes. This is from Balaji Srinivasan. It's from his website, 1729.com, how to start a new country. And he lists different ways to start a new country. One, you can have an existing country and elect new people and basically have new laws and things like that. But that with a country like the United States, that doesn't happen very quickly. There's so much baggage, regulatorily speaking. Yeah, that it's just. I mean, it's a miracle to get any sort of regulation repealed or removed. There's revolution, which you've kind of talked about before. When things get to a certain point, you got to move somewhere. You got to do something. We got to start something new. And the United States was the main example of that recently, relatively recently, the Revolutionary War. You also have war by itself, so you could go take over another country. And then he has something that he calls micronations. So I'll just read this. Now we get to the unconventional, the most obvious of the unconventional approaches, and the one most people think of when they hear the concept of starting a new country. Occurs when an eccentric plants a flag on an offshore platform or a disputed patch of dirt and declares themselves king of nothing. If the issue with elections is that too many people care about them, the issue of these so-called micronations is that too few people care. Because a state, like in currency, is an inherently social affair, few people in the middle of nowhere won't be able to organize a military and enforce laws or be recognized by other nations. Moreover, while an existing state may be content to let people LARP a fake country in their backyard, live action role playing LARP. Don't ask me how I know that. An actual threat to sovereignty typically produces a response with real guns, whether that be the Falklands or Sakhalin. I don't know what that is. So that kind of idea is just, a micronation. Oh, I'm now the king of so and so and this square 10 feet of land. Well, that doesn't make any difference because it's so small and nobody cares. The next one, which we're kind of alluding to in a way, is seasteading. Seasteading is in international waters. You can gather a group of people together and start your own country. And I don't know how well that would be received originally, or to start. Probably it wouldn't be taken seriously, but then as it grew, it would be more and more. Another one that he talks about is space. Space is decades away, if not longer. I think there are far more. We would talk about going to Mars and all these things. I think there are way more things to and maybe I'm wrong. Just the magnetic field issue with some of these places, you're not going to survive very long. There's so many different things that go into it, and I don't think space as of right now is I don't think it's logistically possible yet. And then he talks about something that he calls cloud countries. He says, and finally we arrive at our preferred method, the cloud country. Our idea is to proceed cloud first, land last. Rather than starting with the physical territory, we start with a digital community. We recruit online for a group of people interested in founding a new virtual social network, a new city, and eventually a new country. We build the embryonic state as an open source project. We organize our internal economy around remote work. We cultivate in-person levels of civility. We simulate architecture and virtual reality, and we create art and literature that reflects our values. Over time, we eventually crowdfund territory in the real world, but not necessarily contiguous territory. That means all connected. Because an underappreciated, I think that's what it means. That's what it means, right? I'm being silly. Because an underappreciated fact is that the internet allows us to network enclaves. Put another way, a cloud community need not acquire all its territory in one place at one time. It can connect 1,000 apartments, 100 houses, a dozen cul-de-sacs in different cities into a new kind of fractal polity with its capital in the cloud. Over time, community members migrate between these enclaves and crowdfund territory nearby, with every individual dwelling and group house presenting an individual opportunity for expansion. So this is an interesting idea. I don't know how well that particular type resonates with me versus kind of a seasteading idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept, and I think you can certainly do a lot of that virtually. I think cultivating a lot of those ideas, governance, getting those ideas on paper, getting a community to agree to those laws, so to speak, in a virtual form. But Yeah, I don't know about the non-contiguous aspect because you're still subject to the laws of the actual owner of the land, and so
And I don't
or
know
the
if he's
you
talking
know
about eventually like everyone selling their property and then coming together, or what.
yeah, I
I
mean
don't know if he's just saying,
eventually
"Hey, I'm a, you know."
yeah,
Go ahead.
eventually there has to be some sort of coming together. You've got to own your land so you can truly put the principles in practice, right? And so how soon that happens, I guess, is debatable, but it's an interesting concept to begin with, at least.
So I was thinking of names for new countries. I get the cart way ahead of the horse. Is that the right? Is that the right phrase?
I think so.
And um, I was thinking of naming it Obama Land, because then all the powers that be would leave it alone. They would just go, "Oh, that's Obama. That's, they're doing good," or some
It's
sort
probably
of
been Oprah land.
Oprah Land. No,
Yeah.
I don't.
Those
I'm
things
of
are
course
trademarked, though.
being silly about those things. I wouldn't really want to name it Obama Land, but
Tyler
kind of.
World.
I what I do like is the idea of developing an online community first, because if you are going to eventually go and gather somewhere together, you're going to need that kind of impetus. You're going to need that uh, a groundswell
Co-
of getting togetherness. You're going to need that
like
unity.
like-minded people with a certain degree of that proves to be cohesive in their ideas and their desires to make something happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. There's You can get together with a group of people online, but until you get people who are actually physically able to do something, it's just not going to happen. A physical gathering is not going to happen um, soon. Um, I'm hoping that it doesn't come to a point where we need to be somewhere, that we need to do this. Like, oh, I can't live my life how I want to. I hope this doesn't come from a need to do this, but it may eventually become a need for people to do this. And so this is why I was mentioning cruise ships, um, because now I've never been on a cruise ship. You've probably been on you're way more traveled than I am. Have you been on a cruise ship?
I think I was on the Queen Mary as like a tourist. I don't know that I've ever been on a cruise ship that was actually moving through the water very
Oh,
fast.
oh, interesting.
Maybe a little,
I thought you would
maybe a
have.
little journey up the coast. No, I don't. I don't. That doesn't appeal to me really.
I haven't really wanted to do that either. But so I was thinking of kind of the cruise ship being like the Washington D.C. of the place, because
Yeah.
the cabins are so small. It's basically just a room. There's not a place to prepare food. There may be a bathroom, but it's just you'd be really cramped in there unless you really took several different cabins. So I was thinking kind of um, the cruise ship as being kind of the mothership and just kind of the DC, um, the seat of government, so to speak. And you can have a lot of the commerce starting there, because you'd have shops and be able to buy your food and buy clothing, and you could have little runners coming, ships that service and bring your Amazon packages and things like that.
You, you'd probably want to convert some of it, right, to green space where you could grow your own stuff and maybe have a goat or two.
Well, on the ship, I don't I don't envision that it could come to that. I'm just looking at like the ship being the kind of the center of the hub, and then you have people kind of building out, and then you have floating
You have
platforms that people can
a flotilla.
a flotilla. So um, I'm just I'm just brainstorming. If this isn't interesting to you, just, turn it off. Not you, Adam. If to the viewer and the listener, I was doing some calculations.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen the Boxable? I know
No.
it's amazing that I could even run a calculator. This has been in the news a little bit lately. Elon Musk is living in something that they call the Boxable, and it's a $50,000 home that is basically foldable. It comes on a truck, and it unfolds, and then you basically have, I think it's like 300 or 400 square feet. It's not very big at all, and it's basically a studio apartment, and it has a bathroom, it has a shower, it has a bed, it has a kitchen, and kind of a living room, and it's not very big, and they cost about $50,000. So I was looking at some of these cruise ships, and the new ones are $1 billion or more. And I was thinking, how many people could we get? How many Boxables could we get out on the sea? Of course, I'm gonna go. I know you can't just pay $50,000, but for $1 billion, you get 20,000 homes. Of course, you'd probably have to double or triple or quadruple that to get the infrastructure and the floating platforms and the power generation and the water and the the utilities. But it's really not that far off, and that's just kind of a platform that's ready to go, the Boxable. You could probably do it for less than that with shipping containers and piece together shipping, make them look nice and outfit them and things like that. And maybe I really don't know what I'm talking about with the economics there, but I think this may be something that I just kind of a project that I talk about separate from the podcast on the channels that I'm going to do. Just something interesting that I've been thinking about. So what else? What do you think about this?
I'm open to anything, like I say, I would never interested in the cruise ship. I think I'd rather be out and about on the land. Not that I wouldn't do a cruise ship, but something about but as far as an embryonic implementation of this larger thing that you and I both kind of envision, which is like a floating island or something of that nature. I think it has a valid place. You start with a ship and then get a bigger ship and then keep building.
It could be such that I learned this from there's a guy in my congregation. He's a tax accountant, so he helps people with tax strategies, and you can basically move to Puerto Rico as long as you're there for 50%. I think it's plus 1 day of the year. As long as you spend that many nights in Puerto Rico, then you don't have to pay the tax in the United States. So you can make your earning and live in Puerto Rico. So what I'm getting at is you wouldn't necessarily have to live on the cruise ship the whole time. You could have a citizenship of this country. You could have kind of a domicile there that you wouldn't necessarily have to live there. You would have to spend time there probably for tax purposes from different countries, or you could just be a citizen there and live somewhere else. There are countries that are that are a lot more friendly to tax purposes than the United States. The United States is kind of punitive in a way. You mentioned kind of things being punitive. Just they do things just kind of out of spite, and I think the States to some extent has been that way. But there are countries out there that there's way more freedom with regard to income taxes, and so starting this country, you don't even necessarily have to be there full time. You could become a member of this country and become a citizen, and then live wherever you want and travel to and from, and the whole country could move. You could, as it gets warmer, go further north or speaking when you're in the northern hemisphere, and it could go where there's a hurricane coming. Well, you can move around and not. I don't know how easy that would be, but just a lot of interesting things to think about. Because I really wouldn't want to live on a cruise ship specifically. Uh, you really have to be a pioneer and just kind of have to really be fed up with what's going on to go want to live on a cruise ship or some little floating villa that you have. So anyway, we went kind of far from getting mad at the Biden administration to now, it's a straight line to living on a cruise ship, a floating island. So we're in space eventually.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts, Adam?
You talk about the idea that, these things can be uncomfortable, like being pioneers, but sometimes, some people have to be pioneers in order to get out of their comfort zone and to realize something even bigger and better. So who knows, Tyler, you and I might be shipmates sometime in the near future out of necessity. I'll go where there's freedom.
Like I said, I hope it doesn't come down to doing it because we need to. And, and for most people, for them to do that, they would almost need to. Or it needs to be built up enough so that there is an attractive opportunity that the trade-offs are such that, okay, yeah, I'm going to be living in this little house, but I'm going to have this much more freedom to do this or that. So the trade-offs have to be there before that can happen. I don't know how specifically to build a community. I'm, struggling hard enough just to get these videos out there. And I've always been thinking of ways to do that. Citizen representatives is an idea to reduce corruption in politics by uniting its citizens to elect lawmakers with the agreement that they will vote on bills according to a majority vote. And I would hope, if we start a nation, it would be we'd have something like that built into the Constitution. A lot of interesting things we've talked about today. You can find us on all the social media sites, on all the podcast sites. If you wouldn't mind sharing this with friends and family, that any clips or things that you find interesting. The idea is to get the politics more into the hands of the people and to get power back to the people. We really appreciate you tuning in, and we will catch you next time.